Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
And welcome to this September 11, 2014 edition of Nightcast. After talks with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry in Jeddah, 10 Arab nations pledged to provide military support and humanitarian aid and to halt the flow of funds and foreign fighters to IS. Mr. Kerry told the BBC's Barbara Plett-Usher that the coalition was ready to counter the group and did not need Iran's cooperation.
The details of what each country is going to do within the breadth of all of the things that they've accepted as possibilities will be worked out over the course of the next days. What they have done is sign up to the coalition, agree that ISIL has to be destroyed, accept the full parameters of President Obama's strategy, and now it will be worked out with the military experts and the intelligence experts exactly which country is doing what within the framework of that strategy. Well, Iran has its own antipathy towards ISIL, obviously. Iran is already attacking ISIL from its own bases. We don't have any plans to cooperate with Iran. It's just not in the cards. Where our focus is on ISIL. And we will continue to deal with Iran on the nuclear negotiations that we're involved in. But we believe we can take on ISIL in the current coalition that we have, and that's the breadth of the coalition. Well, it's actually going to grow, but not with Iran.
And why do you believe that you can create a competent national Iraqi army when you weren't able to do it the whole time when you were actually in the country? Which is
well,
not
don't
the case
say
now.
me.
The Americans.
Yeah, that's very nice, but first of all, I was opposed to our going in there, number one. Number two, I don't believe that the blame lies in the lack of training. It lay in the sectarianism that entered into it after we left. And unfortunately, over a period of time, the recruitment began to become a one-sect military that lacked the trust and respect of people in the country and lacked a stake in standing up to ISIL in that particular part of the country when ISIL came in. There is a core of this army that is ready to fight, capable of fighting, well-trained, and we will build on that. There are also others who are there, not quite as capable or ready, but they're still at a level of training where people believe they can be made ready. So we think there's a core entity there that does have the ability, given a government that they're willing to fight for, given a unifying presence within Iraq of governance that they feel is worth fighting for. We think there's a strong likelihood that there's going to be a very different engagement in the future, and that's exactly what countries are signing up for.
Okay, didn't mean to cut him off there too soon, but friend, while President Obama was in Washington preparing to deliver the speech he gave last night, giving the strategy for dealing with the Islamic State militants, the regional president of Iraqi Kurdistan was at one of the battlefronts near Mosul. The Kurds have slowly regained areas seized by the IS militants in a lightning strike last month and say they are ready to take part in a broader action. The BBC's Jim Muir reports from northern Iraq.
Council of War time for the Iraqi Kurds. Their president, Masoud Barzani, arrived at the military command headquarters in western Kurdistan to plan operations on that front. All the top brass of the Kurdish Peshmerga forces were there. The focus was on pushing the Islamic radicals of IS out of the remaining parts of Kurdistan they captured last month. But with a new Iraqi government in Baghdad and President Obama galvanizing allies to eliminate IS, The Kurds are signaling they're ready to go further.
The Peshmerga have been able to get back most of the parts of Kurdistan that were lost. Definitely, if there's a bigger and broader plan to destroy the terrorists, the Peshmerga are ready to play an active and major role.
Then it was off on a field visit to the front near Mosul Dam. The dam itself was captured by the Islamists last month, but retaken recently by the Kurds, with help from American airstrikes. From here, the president could make out IS positions in the distance. It's proving slow going, dislodging the militants. They fight hard. Some blow themselves up when they run out of ammunition. They also have access to advanced weapons that the Kurds don't have. So the Kurds are ready and willing to do their bit on the ground, no question about that. But what they stress over and again is that although they appreciate American air support, what they really need is modern, more advanced and heavier weapons if they're to do the job properly. The Kurds believe the Americans are serious about tackling the self-styled Islamic State. They've already been on the receiving end of its brutal violence. They're determined to help uproot it. Jim Muir, BBC News, near Mosul Dam in northern Iraq.
President Obama has promised a relentless military campaign to try to degrade and ultimately destroy the militant group Islamic State, IS. In a televised address in America to the American people, President Obama announced an extension of airstrikes to Syria. But he added his continued theme that he would not be deploying ground troops to take on IS. Paul Woods reports.
The following report contains some disturbing images.
This is one of several battlefronts against the Islamic State. These are Kurds in northern Syria. They've just made common cause with Syrian Arab rebels. It's one part of what President Obama hopes will be a regional coalition against the jihadis, backed by American air power. Mr. Obama promised a systematic campaign of airstrikes against what he called these terrorists.
We will hunt down terrorists who threaten our country wherever they are. That means I will not hesitate to take action against ISIL in Syria as well as Iraq. This is a core principle of my presidency. If you threaten America, you will find no safe haven.
One target could be the Syrian town of Raqqa, which functions as the Islamic State's capital. People in Raqqa know all too well the harsh reality of ISIS rule. There's even an underground resistance. But even here, they're wary about US airstrikes.
Tell me, what is your reaction?
There is a part of the civilians say, if a US bomb Raqqa, I will be with ISIS against the US. There's a lot of innocent people will be dying for the US airstrike. The city of Raqqa is a small city, and all the buildings of ISIS, it's in the neighborhood of the civilians.
In Lebanon, a reminder of why the Islamic State inspires such terror. This captured soldier is about to be beheaded. He was among 30 troops taken hostage. This is the mourning for a second soldier. Many in Lebanon fear this could cause a new sectarian civil war, Sunni Muslim against Shia Muslim.
President Obama promised a mixture of bombing and politics. The politics are needed to try to win back Sunni Muslims who've sworn allegiance to the Islamic State. The risk in bombing is that any civilian casualties could drive more Sunnis into the arms of the jihadis. Paul Wood, BBC News, Beirut.
You know, friends, this thing is extremely, extremely complex, and yet in another way it's simple. You know, I saw one report last night that said Mr. Obama's really fighting for the wrong side. And I hope to get licenses for some of that material. Outstanding report I saw last night on a program that put out by a fellow that does a thing called The Watchman. And we're going to see if we can get some licenses, some of the graphics for that. I'm going to try to carefully present that so you can understand the issues involved and how and why. Even some people who are saying, well, about time, Mr. Obama, nonetheless, not everyone, even on the political right, is on board with Mr. Obama in this. Some are saying, like James Joyer outside the Beltway calls the plan whack-a-mole with no end in sight. You know, a mole, M-O-L-E, a mole, whack-a-mole with no end in sight. Another says, frankly, this is simply the logical continuation of Obama's existing IS non-strategy and indeed his general counter-terrorism strategy of blowing up the bad guys and hoping they get tired of it eventually. The Atlantic's David Frum writes that Mr. Obama's plan will boost Iranian hegemony in the region and aid the brutal Syrian government of Bashar Assad. He acknowledges the irony of his views since, as a White House speechwriter, he helped sell the 2003 Iraq invasion to the public. Those of us associated with the Bush administration hear the burden of having launched a war on false premises that then yielded disappointing results, he says. He goes on to argue that unlike the Iraq War, this latest intervention has no discernible aims. It's a reaction, an emotional reaction without purpose, without strategy, and without any plausible or even articulated definition of success, he concludes. Another early backer of the Iraq War, Daily Dish's Andrew Sullivan, also has a bad feeling about what's in store. Quote, this is an almost textbook case for not starting a war, he writes. I've come to the conclusion that the administration saw a kind of tipping point on the ground with IS, had no real solution, and improvised this strategy on the fly. Friends, in Pakistan, heavy flooding, both in India and Pakistan, has killed at least 400 people. The floods have caused devastation in northern and eastern Pakistan and triggered landslides in the politically divided region of Kashmir. The rescue operation is providing an immense challenge, as you'll see in this video, as rushing waters have left thousands homeless. Andrew North reports from Jang in the Pakistani province of Punjab.
There's been yet more flooding overnight and this morning. In fact, we've had to move our own position because the water levels are rising now so fast. And if you just, if we move the camera, you can see behind me there a school building that's been flooded. That yesterday was still on dry land. And if we bring the camera back, you can see huge areas behind me that again have been flooded overnight. And this is partly now because the authorities are in fact blowing up dikes that were holding the water back just to release the pressure. So much of this is actually coming downstream from across the border in India. It's no longer raining here, as you can see. In fact, it's fiercely hot. But they simply cannot cope with the level of water that's coming down here. So of course what this means is that even more people are going to be affected. There's no question that the relief authorities, those trying to help, are under extreme pressure. They're saying themselves that, in fact, in this area, although Pakistan has experienced worse floods, but they're saying in this area, this is the worst they've seen in decades. And they are really struggling to cope, so that is certainly leading to a kind of a build-up of frustration. But at the same time, there are large numbers of army, local government officials, volunteers as well, helping out with the relief effort. But of course, to some extent, people are simply having to fend for themselves. And as I'm talking to you, there are still many people on those houses behind me. I've seen them. They're calling out for boats. But of course, with the amount of water that's here, it's pretty difficult for the authorities to be able to cope with this, with so many people who are affected.
And friends, the video that you were just watching is dated yesterday. It's video from yesterday. All the rest of our video tonight so far has been from today, including our next video, which relates to the Scottish independence situation. The Scottish independence debate sparks Catalan push. Hundreds of thousands of Catalans are expected to create a giant V on the streets of Barcelona today. They will create a V for vote on Catalan's National Day, because as Scots prepare to go to the polls in a historic vote on independence, many Catalans are pushing for a similar vote there. Tom Burridge reports from Barcelona.
Like the tradition here of building huge human towers, Catalonia can feel very different to the rest of Spain. Catalan, not Spanish, is the language mainly spoken here. Young and old, a large proportion of people in this region want to build a Catalan state, independent from Spain.
Hi, President Mas. Good to see you. Very good, thank you. Yeah, you too.
The region's president plans a vote on independence in November. Questions remain over a new country's membership of the EU. But Catalonia's leader told me a Scottish yes vote would energise his campaign.
Personally, I would like a yes vote in Scotland. I'm 100% sure that if the yes vote wins in Scotland, also very quickly negotiations will take place with the objective of keeping Scotland in the European Union.
It was a mass demonstration 2 years ago in Barcelona that gave real momentum to the independence movement here. But the rules on a referendum, written here in Spain's constitution, mean that a vote would have to be sanctioned by Spain's central government. And Madrid is deeply opposed. So are some Catalans, who remember this important anniversary in a different way. They believe their history has been hijacked by the pro-independence campaign.
We don't like this referendum because we must choose between Catalan or Spain, and for us it's the same.
You want to be both?
We are both.
But once again, big crowds on the streets of Barcelona for Catalonia's National Day.
But as Scots go to the polls, Catalonia's pro-independence movement is in political limbo. David Cameron is seen as something of a hero by pro-independence Catalans for letting Scotland vote. But it seems all but impossible that the Spanish government would give its blessing to a referendum here.
So if there is a vote here, as planned, in less than 2 months, it's unclear what it would mean. First, though, Catalans and Spaniards will watch events in Scotland with a mixture of excitement and unease. Meanwhile, the calls for independence will not cease. Tom Burridge, BBC News, in Barcelona.
Friends, with this being September 11, 9/11, Americans have commemorated the 13th anniversary of the 9/11 terror attacks with ceremonies in New York and Washington. The ceremonies began just before 9 o'clock local time and included a reading out of the names of those who died in the attacks. In Washington, President Barack Obama had mourners in a commemoration held on the White House lawn. And friends, I'm going to tell you about some other video that we have as that plays in the background. As the U.S. marks the 12th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, the building which replaced the two towers of the World Trade Center is nearing completion. This time-lapse video shows the 9 years of construction on the new tower known as One World Trade Center. From foundation to the newly placed spire, the building is now the tallest in the Western Hemisphere, with the addition of the spire topping out in a symbolic 1,776 feet. That'd be 541 meters. This time lapse is courtesy of EarthCam. Nine years of construction going quickly up right before your eyes. And again, friend, the building is now the tallest in the Western Hemisphere, with the addition of the spire topping out in a symbolic 1,776 feet. Up she goes. Again, this is 9 years of time-lapse video showing 9 years of construction on the new tower, again known as One World Trade Center. What you just saw there was from the foundation to the newly placed spire. And friends, that's it for our report tonight on 9/11/2014. God willing, and the creek don't rise, we'll be back again Sunday night. No program Friday night or Saturday night. Thursday's the end of our broadcasting week. But we will be here on the weekend for those of you who know how to find us on another channel. Until next time, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying so long and good night, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on COGTV.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the COGTV.org video archive.